I think I know why Mark Milley wanted to leave our military equipment behind in Afghanistan. The military-industrial complex. If Milley were to be investigated thoroughly, I am 100% convinced that we would find that Mark Milley has taken massive bribes from military contractors. General Mark Milley is a traitor.
Mr. Reagan.
Mark Milley was introduced to most Americans when he testified before the House Armed Services Committee in 2021, and he said, "I want to learn more about white rage."
And I want to understand white rage.
What a little bitch. How did a little bitch like Mark Milley ever get into this position? Ah, yes, that's right. Because he's the lapdog of the left. That's why. He's the little bitch lapdog of the left, and he will do whatever the deep state tells him to do, no matter how depraved, no matter how evil. You will see, through the evidence that I'll lay out in this video, that Mark Milley is the deep state's hatchet man. I will lay out this case in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Are you prepared for what's coming? Remember how difficult it was to get proper medical care during COVID? Sick people were left to fend for themselves, unable to receive the help they needed. Now, with another election coming upon us, the deep state knows that justice is coming, and as we've seen, the powers that be are acting like cornered animals, and they will be at their most dangerous as the election nears. We need to prepare our minds, our hearts, and also our bodies. I would like to introduce you to Zeolite Extra spray from Epic Minerals, your ultimate defense against heavy metals and other toxins that compromise your health. This powerful formula detoxifies your body, eliminating heavy metals and other poisons. If there is an impending crisis, the ability to cleanse your system to maintain a healthy body could mean the difference between life and death. Don't wait until it's too late. Arm yourself with Zeolite Extra spray and ensure you are prepared for whatever the deep state throws your way. Stay vigilant, stay healthy. Epic Minerals, your defense against a toxic world. Go to www.epicminerals.net, promo code Reagan to save 10% off of your order. There is a great article by Haley McLean on Julie Kelly's Declassified Substack, which outlines Mark Milley's insubordination on January 6th and how he intentionally prohibited National Guard troops from helping to protect the Capitol building from the crowd of protesters. Now, Milley has claimed that he was concerned that Trump would overstep the limits of his presidential powers as prescribed by the Constitution. Maybe he was concerned, maybe he wasn't. Either way, he has used this concern as a pretext for insubordination and acts of sedition many times. McLean's article details Milley's connections, those he has sought counsel from, and I presume those from whom he takes his orders. These include Susan Rice and Robert Gates, both Obama officials. These are not members of the Trump administration. They have no authority to be giving orders to Milley. They shouldn't even be talking to him because Obama policies and Trump policies are in many ways antithetical, and Obama and Donald Trump adversarial. So for Mark Milley to be in communication with Trump's political adversaries, well, that says a lot. Remember, Obama's CIA director John Brennan and his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they cooked up the Russia collusion hoax in order to spy on Trump. So if Obama's people were talking to Milley, Milley was their guy on the inside. Mark Milley pretends that he really believed that Trump was going to take over the country and that he was the one man who could prevent this unconstitutional seizure of power by this rogue president. But I believe that that is a lie. This is his weak excuse to reconcile his constant insubordination and acts of sedition. Obama, Pelosi, the rest of the deep state operatives, they were never really afraid of a coup, but rather they were conspiring together to execute one. According to McLean's article, Milley was also communicating with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Again, two politicians who are adversaries of Donald Trump. They hated Donald Trump, and they conspired to illegitimately remove him from office several times. And Milley is also very tight with another Trump hater, Liz Cheney. The primary focus of Haley McLean's article is the National Guard debacle on January 6th. It turns out, according to an interview Milley gave to the January 6th committee, that it was he who prohibited the use of the National Guard on January 6th. According to the article, Milley detailed how the memorandum prohibited the use of any riot control agent, stating, "We're not doing it, and not only not doing it, you're not going to have it. You're not going to have the opportunity to use it." Additionally, he mentioned that while such measures might be authorized under different circumstances on another day, they were explicitly forbidden at that time on this day. Apparently, the memo authorized 360 military personnel to assist Metro Police on January 6th, but these troops could not be employed without the personal approval of Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy, who also appears to be complicit in all of this, acting under the authority of Mark Milley. There's a lot of he said, she said about what happened on that day, but ultimately, these troops were activated way too late. So I guess the so-called insurrection couldn't have been that bad after all. But what it really looks like here is that Mark Milley wanted the protesters to get into the Capitol. He wanted things to get out of hand, and he wanted things to get violent. There were far too few Capitol Police to control a crowd of that size, and there was zero military assistance. Until now, we've always blamed Pelosi and McConnell for disregarding Trump's offer of National Guard troops to help protect the Capitol that day.
Nancy Pelosi turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't do that,
but
and now
Nancy
I understand,
Pelosi doesn't have
I
the authority
understand that the
you
police
have as
testified against.
Commander-in-Chief, though.
Listen to me, Kristen. Listen to me. I understand that the police testified against her, the chief very strongly against her, Capitol Police, great people. They testified against her, and they burned all the evidence. Okay, they burned all the evidence. They destroyed all the evidence about Nancy Pelosi.
What do you say to people who wonder why you as Commander-in-Chief, you have authorities that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as Commander-in-Chief?
No, she has authority over the
Why
Capitol.
didn't you send help in that moment, though?
Frankly, just so you understand, I assumed that she took care of it. She turned down.
But when you realized that the National Guard wasn't coming?
Well, you don't realize anything until quite a while. National Guard not coming. I asked it to be there 3 days in advance, and she turned it down.
She says that request was never officially made.
Oh,
just
stop
so
it.
you know.
Let me just tell you.
Let me ask you about pardons,
let me
Mr.
tell
President.
you. The mayor of D.C. gave us a letter saying that she turns it down. Okay, we have it. Nancy Pelosi also was asked, and she turned it down. The police commissioner
I'm talking about
Capitol
the day
Police,
of, though.
wait a minute.
Yep.
Capitol Police said that he wanted it, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't accept it. She's responsible for January 6th.
And indeed, they are to blame. In fact, just the other day, a new video popped up on X of Nancy Pelosi admitting that she had neglected to supply troops to the Capitol and blaming herself for things getting out of control there.
We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
That is not a question of how they had been. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
Of course, this is all for show. On that particular day, Pelosi just happened to be shooting a documentary about herself, of course. And so a lot of what she's saying is for the documentary.
Mom, why did you choose this life?
I didn't really choose this life. It chose me.
We always knew that this responsibility would take us into the night. We'll stay as long as it takes.
I'm going to call the House to order. I hope that it stays in order. If it doesn't stay in order, I'll call it to order again.
She's trying to make herself look like some kind of great hero, restoring the democracy that Trump has threatened, or whatever nonsense they're pretending to believe. And so I think that what she's doing here is trying to exaggerate the gravity of that day. But what she didn't realize in that moment was that the question of who kept the National Guard troops away would eventually become an issue. And so it's amusing to see this woman who has blamed Trump for the lack of National Guard troops for so long admit in that video that actually, on the day, she blamed herself. But apparently, Mark Milley also had a major hand in negating the use of National Guard troops. According to Colonel Earl G. Matthews in an interview with Red State back in January, Milley is the Don Barzini of the deep state. Emilio the Wolf Barzini was the second most powerful mafia don in the Godfather films and the novels. This is the man who conspires to have Vito Corleone murdered. Matthews goes on, he says, he is the most powerful chairman of the Joint Chiefs in history. It was Milley all along, and I didn't realize it. Milley was manipulating this entire stuff from point start. This is about civilian control of the military. There was none. There is none. I argue that Mark Milley had more control over the D.C. Guard on January 6th than Donald Trump did. If Donald Trump wanted to call the Guard to go into the Capitol, Milley would not let him do it. And, although this is entirely speculative on my part, I suspect that this was something that Milley had been instructed to do by either Susan Rice or Nancy Pelosi. Now, apparently, Mark Milley did confer with Susan Rice in the days leading up to January 6th. And although there's no direct evidence of Milley and Pelosi conferring in the days leading up to January 6th, you may remember that Nancy Pelosi went to Milley behind Donald Trump's back and voiced concerns about Donald Trump using nuclear weapons.
Speaker of the House Pelosi called me to inquire about the president's ability to launch nuclear weapons. She was concerned and made various personal references characterizing the president.
Milley ends up assuring her, "I know the system and we're okay. The president alone can order the use of nuclear weapons. One person can order it. Several people have to launch it."
Now, all of this is very scandalous. All of this is terrible. Mark Milley is a traitor. Mark Milley is insubordinate. He's treacherous. He's treasonous. But I actually have another question. Did Mark Milley have anything to do with embedding all of those agitators into the crowd? To me, this is a very critical question. Now, we know there were a lot of FBI agents in the crowd. In fact, there were so many, the FBI actually has no full accounting of them all. They've lost track. But I have suspected all along that there were other agents provocateur there as well. Were they there on the personal instruction of Nancy Pelosi? Probably not. If she had a hand in that aspect of the PSYOP, she likely had some intermediary working for her. Was that intermediary Mark Milley? Did Milley assign some military personnel that he believed that he could trust to go into the crowd that day, to tussle with police, to break windows, to encourage the crowd to go into the Capitol? I don't know, but it's certainly possible. And so when Mark Milley said this...
And I want to understand white rage. What is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out.
I think he's lying because he must have known about the PSYOP. He must have known what was going on. Otherwise, why would he have withheld troops? If he genuinely believed that this was a threat to our democracy, if he really believed that this was an insurrection, then why wouldn't he have sent the National Guard to protect the Capitol? But he didn't just neglect to send them in. He explicitly denied them. So he wanted January 6th to play out. And so the question is simply, why? And the only answer that I can come up with is he knew that it was a PSYOP. And he was not just standing down. He was involved. And ordinarily, I give subjects of my videos the benefit of the doubt. Well, maybe they're just that stupid. But in this case, stupidity wouldn't actually make sense. A stupid general would have bungled an attempt to use troops. Only someone with sinister intent would actively prevent it. So I believe that he was lying to Congress there in that clip. He lied to Congress. That alone should get him sent to prison. Now look, this is a great article. Congratulations to Haley McLean for producing such an excellent article, and Julie Kelly Substack Declassified for having the good sense to publish it. But Mark Milley has committed multiple acts of insubordination. One of the most controversial and well-reported moments was when Mark Milley stepped outside the chain of command and independently contacted a Chinese official to assure the Chinese that the U.S. would not be using nuclear weapons against them.
Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley called his Chinese counterpart, General Li Zhejiang, twice in the closing months of the Trump presidency to tell him the U.S. would not strike China. Milley's first call last October 30th was prompted by intelligence that China thought the U.S. was prepared to attack.
Why would you do that? Mark Milley was undermining Trump's authority and potentially putting the United States in danger of a military strike against a formidable enemy. The guy isn't even in the chain of command. His job is only to advise the president. So what the hell is he doing making diplomatic decisions unilaterally? If he has an idea of something that he thinks needs to be done, he briefs the president on it, and then nothing. That's it. That's where the job begins and ends. His usurpation of power in this case was, according to many, an act of sedition. And again, this alone should have resulted in a court-martial and an imprisonment.
What he did was absolutely treasonous. You know, that would have put us in great danger, because I did deal with China in a very rough manner, and I was doing very well with them, by the way. They had a lot of respect for Trump, and they had a lot of respect for our country. But if he was saying things behind the back to try and neutralize that, then he put our country in great danger.
Now, here's a story that flew under the radar. After Trump had ordered troops out of Syria, officials defied Trump's orders and lied to Trump about it. Special Envoy Jim Jeffrey, in an interview with Defense One, admitted, "We were always playing shell games to not make clear to our leadership how many troops we had there. The actual number of troops in northeast Syria is a lot more than the roughly 200 troops that Trump initially agreed to leave there in 2019. Now, as far as I'm aware, Milley has not taken responsibility for this particular act of insubordination, but as Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, I highly doubt that he was unaware of what was going on. And given Milley's track record of circumventing Trump's military decisions and defying his orders, I would bet that this deception was his idea. Here's another gem. You may remember that after the disastrous withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, Donald Trump would often tell a story about a general who insisted that it was cheaper to leave all of our military equipment with the enemy rather than to take it back home. Well, you're never going to guess who that idiot general was. That's right, Mark Milley.
And we left $85 billion worth of the best equipment anywhere in the world. Apache helicopters, brand new, by the way. Night goggles, 700,000 machine guns and rifles and guns, 700,000. And now they're all over the black market. And many have been given to China, many have been given to Russia, because they take everything apart, including the Apaches, and they re-engineer, and they can build it themselves. They're trying to figure out, because the Apache is one of the great weapons of the world, and now they each have two of them. And they said, thank you very much, we appreciate it. I think they took in 28 Apache helicopters, brand new. $85 billion. And I said, we're getting out, and when we get out, I want every nut, every bolt, every screw. We're taking everything. We're taking down the tents. You know, they left all the tents. They left everything. Couldn't they have flown in a couple of hundred pilots and flown the planes up? And I'll never forget Milley saying to me, Sir, it's cheaper to leave the equipment than to bring it. I said, really? You got a $50 million airplane. You got a $29 million gorgeous helicopter. We had every type of helicopter. Many of them brand new, literally out of the box. 28, 29 million. We have $60, $70 million planes. You mean you think it's cheaper to leave it there so they can have it than it is to fill it up with a half a tank of gas and fly it into Pakistan or fly it back to our country? You think, yes, sir, we think it's cheaper, sir. That's when I realized he was a f***ing idiot.
I'm sorry.
And then Joe Biden gets into office after the totally fair and clean and just 2020 election with zero fraud and zero election rigging. So then Biden gets in, and they do pull out of Afghanistan, and they do leave the $85 billion in military equipment behind in Afghanistan. Milley got his way. But here's the thing. I believe it was intentional. I have a theory about this. I think I know why Mark Milley wanted to leave our military equipment behind in Afghanistan. The military-industrial complex. Mark Milley is connected with every major supplier of U.S. military equipment. These massive companies are always looking for new ways to convince the U.S. government to give them more money for more military equipment. And so if the U.S. military were simply to leave, let's say, $85 billion worth of military equipment behind in Afghanistan, well, in order to resupply the military, we would have to give another $85 billion of taxpayer money to these businesses. So these businesses are highly incentivized to encourage our U.S. military to be irresponsible with the equipment that they sell them. And so it's not a huge surprise that Mark Milley, being buddies with all these guys, might have been coerced into recommending to the president that we leave all of our military equipment behind. If Milley were to be investigated thoroughly, I am 100% convinced that we would find that Mark Milley has taken massive bribes from military contractors. In fact, we were warned about this over 50 years ago by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in his farewell address to the nation.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime. or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
And this, I think, is how the deep state works. They find someone in a position of great power, like General Mark Milley. They present him with an irresistible offer to make millions of dollars. An offer to put them in an entirely new tax bracket is some small little corrupt action. But of course, after this corrupt action is taken, evidence now exists that could put this operative, in this case Mark Milley, in prison for years. And so now, they've got you by the balls. Now they control you. And this is why I think Mark Milley is a controlled operative of the deep state. Everyone thinks that the deep state is like the Illuminati. They think it's some kind of strictly organized group of powerful men sitting around a table in the shadows, diabolically orchestrating the New World Order. But really, the deep state is just anyone with undue power over the federal government. And I would consider any politician or any government official or any federal bureaucrat to be corrupt if they are acting in their own best interest as opposed to the best interest of the American people. And so these are my definitions of the deep state and of political corruption. And I think that everybody watching this, you should all be using these definitions. Because given these definitions, the concept of the deep state and the concept of widespread corruption in DC, they don't seem that far-fetched. In fact, I think it becomes immediately obvious that this is exactly what's going on in Washington today. When President Donald Trump visited St. John's Episcopal Church in D.C. after BLM activists set fire to it, Mark Milley came out and apologized for walking with Trump that day.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, I should not have been there. It was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it.
Incidentally, the video in which Mark Milley makes that apology, the rest of that video is just a call for more woke diversity in the military.
We are still struggling with racism, and we have much work to do. We must, we can, and we will do better. We must ensure that diverse candidates have equal opportunity to branch into the career fields and serve in the key positions most likely to produce our future senior leaders. And we must ensure fairness and equity at all key gateway selection boards, including promotion, command, and war college.
I can't help but to think that somebody is telling this guy exactly what to say. It's hard for me to believe that he's all into diversity, you know. Or maybe he really is that stupid, who knows. But I don't know. I don't think so. There was a tweet from a woman praising Mark Milley for his apology. And I'm not going to make you guess. I'm just going to tell you. Yeah, that's right. It was Susan Rice. If one day they found evidence that that entire speech was written by Susan Rice, I would not be shocked in the slightest. Now, I just happened to send a text message to Sebastian Gorka about this video back when I was writing the script for it, and he just texted me like a bunch of articles and videos, to help me out making this video. And as Gorka is a military expert, he explains the gravity of Milley's actions, I think, a lot better than I can.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs has zero command authority, none. He's a military advisor to the commander-in-chief, and the chain of command goes from the president to the Secretary of Defense, period. If I had called up the Chinese PLA, the People's Liberation Army, to give them, I don't know, a piece of technology, a secure piece of equipment, I should be in a federal supermax for the rest of my life. Here, we have this statement from his press secretary moments ago admitting that he was talking to his counterparts. That's not your job. Warning the Chinese of fake things you are propagating about the commander-in-chief is the definition of treason, aiding and abetting our enemies. This man has to be arrested, investigated, and if he's found guilty, locked away.
First things first, horsewhip Mark Milley,
cashier him out of the army and put him in the brig. He is a disgrace to the uniform of the United States Army.
Amen.
This is a man who says he doesn't know what critical race theory is, but it's fine that it's being taught at West Point. He's a man who said on Capitol Hill, I'm white and I want to understand white rage. Well, Mark Milley, you disgrace to America. Perhaps you should find out a little bit more about jihadi rage. And I would say that to your face, you disgrace, you utter disgrace to the uniform you wear.
Tell us what you really think, right? Mark Milley, at one point, was perhaps one of the most active of all the deep state operatives. He was, I believe, the deep state's most aggressive hatchet man. They make the plans and he executes them. Everyone else keeps their hands clean. I don't think that he probably ever believed that Trump was a threat to our democracy, as leftists always say. I don't think that he ever really believed that Trump would overstep his constitutional authority or declare martial law or declare himself emperor or whatever other fairy tales leftists tell themselves. I don't think Milley believed any of that. Colonel Earl G. Matthews explains in his interview with Red State that Milley and the other top brass in the Army leadership were obsessed with the image of the military. And this is why they often make irrational and even absurd decisions. And I'm sure he's right, but I don't think that explains everything. Now, I think that there's a lot more to it. I believe that Milley intended to sabotage Trump at every turn because Trump was a threat to the authority of the deep state. And Mark Milley, well, he's being used to protect the deep state. And why would he protect them? Well, it's for the same reasons that anyone works for an organized crime syndicate. It's either the carrot or the stick. Milley is probably getting paid very, very well, and as I said, it's probably through the military-industrial complex. And maybe it's because Milley has some skeletons in the closet and they're blackmailing him. My guess is that it's both. Work with us and you'll get rich. Work against us, bad things might happen. Either way, Milley has been a dangerous operative ever since Trump got into office. Mark Milley is a traitor. As soon as Trump gets back into office, Milley must be investigated, tried, and imprisoned. Democrats have referred to Donald Trump as a traitor and Trump supporters as insurrectionists. The irony is that they are the real traitors, and their hatchet man, Mark Milley, he is the real insurrectionist. Well, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and remember, it's not that liberal friends are ignorant, it's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.